I've been living in Idaho for just over 4 years now. I moved from the Dallas-Fort Worth area in 2015 with my parents. I'm 24 now, moved out of my parents' house into my own apartment with my beautiful fiancée, and I couldn't be happier. Since I was already out of high school and I keep to myself more than most, my group of friends is rather small. I'm fairly outgoing and I've never had a lot of difficulty making friends. Still, the only place I ever really have a chance to talk to people is at work. I work as a correctional officer, a prison guard in simple terms. Being surrounded by inmates isn't exactly how I would prefer to spend my day, but it pays a good deal more than most other jobs at entry level. I've worked there for about 3 years now, and anybody that I could call my friend also works there. It's not the best setting to make new friends in, but it works. There are 3 people that I hang out with most of the time. Bowers, Reed, and Taylor are the people closest to me. Sure, I hang out with plenty of others that work there, but more in a everyone was coming so I came too kind of way. Bowers, Reed, and Taylor are their last names. Working where we do, that's how you know each other. So from here on out, that's how I'll identify them. I spend the most time with Taylor. He and I usually like to ride our bikes around town, grab a bite to eat maybe, drive around and talk. I see Reed most any day at work, but he has quite a busy life. With his wife and their newborn baby, his schedule is mostly dedicated to being a family man now, which is fair. I still see him whenever he has the opportunity. Bowers, on the other hand, is who I have most in common with. I'm a big horror fan. I love scary movies, scary stories, scary places, anything to chill your bones and make your skin crawl. Bowers is much the same. He's always talking about writing a screenplay for an amateur horror movie he wants to make. I always thought it was a good idea, so we'll sit at work and brainstorm together, trying to come up with a story we deem scary and unique. It's not exactly easy in our primary setting. Prison is a scary place, but for a different reason. A lot of the time when we hang out with each other, we like to go adventuring to the more eerie places that Idaho has to offer. Given that there aren't too many places to go that will make the hair on your neck rise, we have to get a little creative. There's some mountain roads, a couple of abandoned properties, just your run-of-the-mill haunted places. These places serve more of an inspirational purpose than anything. It gets us into the proper on-edge mood to come up with scary elements to a story. When it comes to horror, Bowers also shares the majority of my views on what's properly scary. We both agree that jump scares are cheap. It doesn't take much to make somebody jump, and it generally doesn't matter what object, noise, or figure jump out. It will still make you jump. For me to fully enjoy a horror movie, I like the feeling of being creeped out. One day at work, Bowers comes up to me and mentions this place he saw a video on YouTube about. It was an abandoned factory. I gotta admit, a factory sounded awesome. I'd been in abandoned orphanages before, sure, but never a factory. So I asked him, just how abandoned is it? He explained, well, from what I understand, it was abandoned sometime in the 70s. It was a factory for making concrete, but when they built a new one, they just left the old one to rot. It sounded pretty promising. Where is it? A city called Lime in Oregon, he said. I checked the map on my phone and it showed that Lime was just across the border of Idaho and Oregon. Not a far drive at all, and the factory was sitting just off the side of the main freeway. The pictures I could find on Google just ensured that it would be a fantastic place to explore. My work week was coming to an end, so I texted Bowers and we set up a time for us both to go. My Friday was actually his Thursday, so I figured the best time to go would be my Saturday after he got off of work. He worked until about 10, so we would have the perfect mindset when exploring this abandoned pile of concrete up in the high desert at night time. I showed up to his apartment around 11:30 p.m. Once he had gotten home and changed clothes, he climbed into my Ford Ranger and we headed off into the night, stopping only for some essential supplies, cigarettes and a couple of sodas. The drive was perfect. Traffic was almost non-existent going down the highway, and we had the proper soundtrack of some Pink Floyd to keep us company. I was following the GPS on my phone to the factory. We hopped off the freeway and started down a partially lit road that turned to dirt after driving down it just a short while. Since we were in no hurry, I left my truck in second gear and we just coasted along this gravelly, pothole-riddled road. Eventually it led to concrete again. We had taken an exit that led to the town of Huntington, just to take a bit longer, let it build up in our minds a little more. After another 15 minutes or so of driving, my headlights washed over the old concrete factory in Lime, Oregon. The main part of the factory was on the right-hand side of the road, and there were some old drum silos on the left. We pulled off to the left and parked in the dirt. As soon as I turned my headlights off, We were bathed in darkness, with only the stale green glow from the time displayed on my truck's radio providing any source of illumination. I could instantly feel the sense of uneasiness fill me up. I wasn't exactly regretting the decision to come all the way out here, but it was the fact that we were all the way out here that made me nervous. I checked my phone and I had no reception. Bowers had no signal either. I had 2 small flashlights that we could carry and a full pack of cigarettes to calm my nerves. We also both were carrying our handguns, kind of a just-in-case measure. We got out of my truck and took a look around. As we stood there in the dirt, I looked up at the sky and noticed how brilliantly dark the surrounding area was. I could quite clearly see the Milky Way, millions and millions of stars twinkled down at us, but instead of peace, I was feeling terror. Keep in mind, I did ask for this. This feeling that I'm experiencing is exactly why I love to be scared. My adrenaline was going a little haywire, so I lit a cigarette to relax myself a little bit. The dry, billowy smoke is just what I needed to calm down. As we stood there in silence, we listened for sounds. There were no other cars around, except for the ones passing by on the highway every couple of minutes, but none parked near the factory. There was a slight breeze that wafted through the property, creating the illusion that something was moving objects around in the factory. There was a big hole in the ground, maybe 5 feet by 5 feet, that, when the breeze would hit it just right, would cause a whistle to emanate out into the warm, dry summer air. I walked over to the hole to look inside. I grabbed my flashlight and stood about a foot away from the edge. I clicked the power button and shined the light down inside. At the bottom, maybe 9 or 10 feet, lay piles of rubble, rock and wood. It was too far to jump down, so I aimed my focus elsewhere until such time that I could find another potential entrance. I looked back at Bowers, still standing in front of my truck, just staring off into the factory. I walked up next to him and said, "Hey, this is pretty cool, man, definitely a good choice." And all he uttered was a simple, "Uh-huh." I suggested we go explore the rest of the factory, which he agreed. To get to the main collection of buildings, we had to walk up a slight hill. I was focusing on the graffiti that was plastered all over the walls. Some of it was actually quite impressive, not just the simple tags or names and dates, but actual murals. Some murals got so complex they actually utilised the entire building. Mind you, some of the buildings are quite small, but they would base each one on what I think was supposed to be a Greek god. Each one had its own dedicated building as something of a tribute. I honestly couldn't tell you the significance, but it sure caught my eye. Bowers was focused elsewhere. His face didn't seem to show interest, but instead, indifference. He would walk slowly from one window of a building to the next, turn to face it, shine his light in and stare for a few seconds with a blank expression before moving on to the next one. It didn't quite make sense to me, as he usually loves this kind of stuff, but as of right now, he seemed uninterested in anything. I walked over to join him at the 2 tallest smokestacks on the property. We poked our heads into some holes that looked like they were created after the place had been abandoned, and looked up through the top of the stack. They looked even taller from the inside than they were from the outside. Among more graffiti, the factory was now home to various wildlife from the area, bats and birds being the most mentionable. Other than that, the factory was pretty much dead. Other than a few noises that could be written off as animals or wind, maybe a couple of eye tricks, there wasn't much else. Still, enough to be frightening nonetheless. After exploring for about an hour, I'd gotten my fill of terror for the night. I had plenty of ideas for the screenplay, and still a sense of eeriness that I was sure would last until morning. I looked at Bowers and said, "Well, I think I'm satisfied. Do you want to head back?" Still sticking with simple, inert answers, he replied, "Yeah." I've worked with Bowers for about 2 years now, as he got hired after I did. After knowing him for that long, his responses were troubling. He usually had a lot more energy and enthusiasm than I did. I've never seen him like this. Didn't expect him to be terrified to the point of paralysis, but he'd normally speculate on some scary stuff that might be happening there with me. We could sit there and scare each other by humouring the other on the noise they thought they heard. But not tonight. If I'm being honest, Bowers was scaring a lot more than the factory was. On the walk back to the truck, I decided to mention some ideas I'd had for his screenplay to see if I could drag him out of whatever funk he was in. Maybe he could write about this group of teenagers that find this old abandoned factory and they decide to go in and explore. And only while they're exploring, people keep disappearing from the group, I suggest. "Yeah, that sounds cool," he replied. "Okay then, more than one word, I'm getting somewhere. Or maybe instead of teenagers you could have some kind of supernatural or poltergeist investigator, I said, who's checking out the factory because the inhabitants of the town think it's haunted. Yeah, that may work. I kinda like the idea about the teenagers because I think I'd be a lot more scared of someone in my group disappearing than a ghost, he explained. Alright, this sounds more like him. Now I'm getting the old Bowers back. We made it back to my truck, and as we were getting into it, Bowers said, "Hey, wait! Look, there's a tunnel over there that we didn't check out yet." I turned around and there was a tunnel leading straight underneath the silos. "Oh, okay, let's go check them out," I said. I closed my truck door and we made our way over to the silos. As we peered into the tunnel, it was pitch black. I could barely see moonlight on the other side. It was probably around 7 feet tall. I could stand up straight in it, but because of some pipes that were occasionally protruding from the walls or ceiling, I'd have to duck every now and then. While we walked down the tunnel, the sounds of our shoes and breathing were amplified. It felt like I was walking through a horror movie. The sound was so enhanced, it almost sounded fake. Fabricated. Bowers was walking in front of me, so I was using my light to focus on the ground in front of us. Out of nowhere, Bowers stops walking. I almost run into him because my view was focused on the ground. I asked him, "Are you good, man?" He replied, "I'm not sure." "Okay, what the fuck does that mean?" "I don't know," he whispered. "Dude, you're freaking me out. What's the matter with you?" He said nothing. Just stood there in silence. I was getting worried and, if I'm honest, terribly paranoid. I started shining the flashlight back behind us, half expecting to see some creepy humanoid figure quickly crawling to catch up with us. But the tunnel was empty, with Bowers and I as its only inhabitants. Suddenly, I hear a scratching, rustling noise. I quickly turn around and see Bowers in a dead sprint heading towards the end of the tunnel. I was confused, frightened, and frozen. I watched as my friend ran towards the uncertain end of this dark, damp tunnel, with only his flashlight as a beacon informing me of his distance. Part of me wanted to follow him, but I had no idea what to do at this point. In my head I'm thinking, he's lost his fucking mind. I'm stuck all alone in this tunnel. His light came to a halt in the little concrete room at the end of the tunnel. I could barely make out the outline of his body. He stood there, with his flashlight pointing at the ground. I shined my flashlight down the tunnel at him and could see he was facing away from me, looking at the wall. "Bowers, what the hell are you—" Before I could finish, Bowers screamed as if he'd just been met with his worst fear. I can't imagine what he'd seen, but it must have terrified him to his very core. He dropped his flashlight and started running back down the tunnel towards me. I put my hand on my pistol, ready to take aim at whatever comes behind him. As he got closer, I began to see more of his face. He doesn't look terrified anymore, but happy. Elated almost. I loosened my grip on my gun, thinking he was screwing with me. As he gets closer, his face goes from cheerful to angry. "What's going on?" Bowers runs past me and knocks me on my ass. I hadn't felt a hit like that since high school football. As soon as I got my bearings, I felt across the rocky ground for my flashlight. I stood up and ran to follow Bowers once I found it, back out of the beginning of the tunnel. Bowers ran up the hill. My gut was screaming at me to get in my truck, lock the doors, and wait for Bowers to come back down the hill laughing, telling me it was a joke and that he just wanted to freak me out. Well, if that was the case, it was definitely working. I waited for a second to see if I could hear anything. Then out of the darkness, I hear Bowers call out, "Hey bro, come check this out." "Fuck you, I want to go home," I said back. I waited for a reply, but I didn't get one. This was a little more of an adventure than I bargained for. "Bowers," I shouted out. "Hey bro, come check this out," was his reply. "Oh, for fuck's sake, I've no idea what's going on, but I'm genuinely scared. I don't know what else to do except go find him." I pull my pistol out of its holster and hold it, if for nothing else than to make myself feel a little safer in this whole situation. I start to make my way up the hill and gaze around upon the factory. I shine my flashlight all around, searching for my friend. "Bowers!" "Hey bro, come check this out." A feeling of dread began to pulse through me. "Well, you have to tell me where you are first," I said. Silence again. I couldn't accurately gauge where he was talking to me from, but he sounded far away still. I continued walking towards the factory, going pretty much the same route that we had earlier. I announced, "Listen, Bowers, I'm really freaked out right now, man. I have my gun cocked and ready, so if you're planning on jumping out to scare me, that would be a really bad idea." No reply. "Bowers!" I yelled. From over to my left, I hear him. "Hey bro, check this out." I turned to face him. Bowers was standing through a doorway towards the back of one of the rooms. He didn't look scared or happy or angry anymore. He looked sad. Sad like he'd just received the worst news in his life. Then someone came and gave him even worse news. No tears or anything, just a frown with the most miserable eyes I've ever seen. I said, "What the hell happened to you back there, man?" He didn't move. His expression didn't change. He stood there frozen, almost catatonic. I took a step forward. "Look," I only got one syllable out before Bowers' face shifted from sadness to laughter. He was laughing in a very over-exaggerated manner, kind of a mocking laughter. The laugh wasn't the most disturbing element of this moment. It was how he had contorted his face into a horrific smile. I don't mean just a really big smile, but like an unnaturally wide grin, literally ear to ear. He began to lift his gun. "Bowers, no!" I screamed. He pointed his gun at me, and I took aim at him. He bent his arm and aimed at his head. "Hey bro, check this out." And he pulled the trigger. The sound of the gun firing echoed off the walls of the factory and bounced off the surrounding mountains, going back and forth like a metronome. Bowers' body stiffened and collapsed onto the ground. Blood poured from his head, gushing out of his nose and mouth. There was so much blood I could hear the sound it made as it leaked onto the concrete floor. I screamed as loud as I could. I screamed for someone to come help. But then my screams turned to panicked cries. The kind of cries where you can't catch your breath. I've never had a panic attack, but that's the only way I can describe it. I turned and scrambled for my truck. I ran over the edge of the hill and jumped out into the road. Without stopping, I regained my balance and scurried across the street to my truck. I got out of there as fast as I could. I sped down the highway, trying to get out of the mountains, in range of the cell phone tower so I could call 911. As soon as I say the first bar that came up for my signal with the little 4G next to it, I opened the keypad and started to dial. I dialed 911 and pushed call. It rang a couple of times, but then the call dropped. "God damn it, come on," I shouted to myself. Before I could dial again, my phone started to ring. It was my fiancée. I rejected the call so I could first call the police. I started to dial 911, but my phone started to ring again. And again, it's my fiancée. I answer the phone. "Hello? Hey babe, are you gonna be home soon?" she asked. I replied, panicked. "You're not gonna fucking believe this. I don't know what to do. Bowers and I got to the factory, but he started to act weird, then he killed himself. I'm so scared, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I've got to call the police and get help." She said nothing. I assumed she was in shock, like I was. "Babe, can you hear me? Did you hear what I said?" I asked. After several seconds of silence, I got a reply. Not in my fiancé's voice, but in a still very familiar voice. The voice said, "Hey bro, come check this out."